the First Peoples Radio presents Amplifying Voices, a project which aims to preserve, promote, and revitalize Indigenous languages and cultures. Schedler and Joyce Noonin are knowledge keepers. Over the past 20 years, the two have worked to implement sacred eagle feathers into Manitoba's court system.
My name is Joyce Noonin. I am a knowledge keeper, and I also teach the Cree language to adults and children. And I like to talk a little bit about the feather.
My name is Schedler. Some of the work that I do is circles for reconciliation. I'm also a knowledge keeper for the Inuit language. When I first started my job working with the courts, the director at that time had approached elders about having an eagle feather in courts, but it got shut down really quickly. So I had a chance to start the conversation because I became the senior court worker in courts, and I was able to travel nationally to meetings with other Indigenous court work directors. I brought up the conversation about having eagle feathers in courts for people to swear on with using the oath. Using the eagle feather as the oath. But prior to that, I had the conversation with the elders, the Indigenous people first. I went to the elders, I went to youths, I went to spiritual caregivers, I went to community members, I went to stakeholders. I offered tobacco to the elders and spiritual caregivers, small tokens, and others when I had this dialogue. Of course, not everyone was on board on having the eagle feathers in court, but most were supportive and suggested that I continue. I also had dialogue with the non-Indigenous people to get their thoughts and feedback. And some said it's a perfect time specifically because of reconciliation. Not all Indigenous and non-Indigenous people are on board with having the eagle feathers in the courts, because of the many cultures and beliefs. They feel that some people could be offended. Many non-Indigenous people are not aware of the significance of the eagle feather. Some Indigenous people feel that the feather should only be used in ceremonies or in prayers by an elder. So there are certainly many things to consider. So we started the process. I was gifted 18 eagle feathers. And with those feathers, I was advised to prepare the eagle feathers. There had to be the preparation, there had to be the feast, there had to be the cedar bath, and Joyce will tell you a little bit about that preparation.
So to prepare the eagle feathers for the court and the justice system, we had to include a lot of people to help us with dressing the feathers and making the cases for them to be kept in, because you have to take care of the feather. You cannot just hand it to the courts without having them be taken care of in the case, that they can be used after use and before use. They have to be kept in the sacred place and be taken care of, and they have to be smudged on a regular basis.
So there are 11 Indigenous language families, right? There's 53 Indigenous languages and over 200 dialects. In Manitoba, there are 7 Indigenous languages, which are Innu, Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Dene, Michif, and Inuit. I approached every nation in Manitoba to talk about bringing the eagle feathers into the courtrooms. And because of all those nations, some teachings may be similar. However, how they're delivered in the language is what holds the teaching sacred. I made sure I spoke to every nation in Manitoba. And because of the job I had, I was able to travel across Canada into the territories to discuss this eagle feather, and most everybody was on board. I would say 50% of people were on board. The elders had suggested, the elders and the knowledge keepers suggested that we have before when we prepare those eagle feathers, we had to give them the cedar bath, we had to give them we had to smudge them, we had to have the feast, we had to have the community people come together, and everybody helped in dressing the eagle feathers and all that. But also there was a lot of work prior to that, because we had to have a lot of dialogue with the First Nations, Inuit and Métis people, so that I didn't want to be the sole person making that decision. So the eagle feather signifies strength and truth. The eagle feather is usually gifted to a person who has good standing in the community, good achievements, a role model. And because more and more Indigenous people are discovering, because of the residential schools survivors and the colonization, of course, they're discovering who, and 60 Scoop, right? So now they're finding out who they are, and they're starting to embrace that the eagle feather and what it signifies. But prior to convincing the First Nations communities into bringing this eagle feathers into the courts, we had to have that conversation now with the justice system, which included the judges, some of the lawyers, some of the people that worked, and definitely the court clerks, because they would be the ones that would be carrying this eagle feather into the courts. In the meantime, there was also a federal judge that received 21 eagle feathers from an elder from Opaskwayak Cree Nation. While she was getting hers worked on, we formed a group. There was a federal judge, a provincial judge, myself, and the executive director of courts. And it wasn't easy, because it took us years to plan this, because there was a lot of convincing. Not everybody was on board with having eagle feathers in court, because right now we already have the Bible, we already have the firm in the course, and I'm not sure if there was any other thing. But the reason that I wanted to bring this into court, because I had witnessed so many Indigenous First Nations people come through the court system, and then the Bible is held in front of them, and they're not really sure what to do because of our history. Going from there, I had witnessed many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people coming into the court system. With the court work program that I was working in, we had eagle feathers that people would borrow if they were attending the courts. Sometimes people brought their own, and that was okay. It worked really well for people. And when I witnessed people using the eagle feather, they seemed more alert. They seemed more confident. They seemed, like I have the strength to do this, right? While they are holding the eagle feather. And that's what really prompted me to really make that effort to make it happen. But it wasn't an easy road, like I was saying, because we had to first convince the First Nations communities that that would be a good thing. And I did talk to many elders, and most of them are dead. I mean, most of them have passed on. 3 of the nations that I spoke to have definitely gone. And one of the members that I had asked to lead the ceremony also passed away before we could do the eagle feather. And he was really, really felt honored to be part of that. But sadly, he passed away. So when we got together as a committee, we had, like I said, we had the 2 judges, myself and the executive director. We had to do a lot of work, because it wasn't going to be an easy task, because there had to be training, right? There had to be training in the courtrooms. There had to be training on how to take care of the eagle feather, because it wasn't just taking the eagle feather, slapping it into a box, and here you go, you carry this around, and you take it to circuit court, and you do this with it. We had to figure out how we were going to train the people, that they would feel comfortable doing it, because a lot of people felt a little intimidated by the eagle feather and some of the beliefs that the First Nations people have. And they thought, well, I don't know if I would be the person to hold that eagle feather, right? So there was a lot of those questions. So we had to, of course, convince the justice system that this should happen. And then we had to plan on how we can train everybody. And then, of course, in the meantime, we're having all these meetings and where this is going to happen and where's that's going to take place. But we finally convinced them, and we had the Chief Justice was very supportive, and same as the Chief Judge. So they were supportive in that, and that made it a little bit easier. However, it wasn't that easy because there were many things that we still had to do, because after we said, okay, they're on board now to bring the eagle feathers into the courtroom. But the elders and the knowledge keepers and the spiritual caregivers said, you have to have ceremony where you're bringing those eagle feathers. And you have to have the pipe ceremony, you have to have the sacred fire, and you have to have the feast when you are handing and gifting those eagle feathers to the court system. So we said, okay, we're going to do that.
When Grace first told me that she was trying to bring the eagle feather into the law courts, she asked me if I would be involved in it, and I started on my own questioning elders and people and young students what they thought of the eagle feather coming into the courtroom. Most of the people I've talked to were on board and said, yeah, that's a good idea. I even spoke to some residential school survivors, and they agreed with bringing the feather in because of their experiences with the church and all that. They thought that the eagle feather would be more appropriate than having the Bible there. I started, Grace said to me, can you prepare the feathers with, form your own group of people? So I had a couple of elders that worked with me. Grace worked with me, and we had a couple of youth that came on, and they helped prepare the feathers. Like I said to them, before you can even start or touch the feathers, you have to be on board. Do you believe that the feathers should go in the law courts? And they said, yeah. Because for one thing, you cannot just go out to the community and ask an elder, hey, can you bring your feather to the law courts? Because that's his own feather. That's for his own purpose, for his own healing and helping people. That's his feather. You do not bring somebody else's feather into the law court. So this is why we had to bring in all these feathers. And we spent hours and hours preparing these feathers and smudging them, cleansing them, dressing them, and making cases for them to make sure that they were well taken care of once they left our hands. And I think, like I say, we worked for hours decorating them. And the people that said they would help were very committed. They showed up all the time when it was time for us to work on the feathers. And everybody felt really good that they contribute to this big project that Grace was working on. And we helped a lot. The people that were helping us, like the elders and the youth and, the middle-aged, they were all on board with this. And it took a long time. Like, it wasn't just something you work on for a week to prepare to get where we went to.
One of the teachings in the Indigenous community on the meaning of feathers and the beliefs that Indigenous people believe that all natural things in the universe have souls and spirits, right? I myself I'm Kiask, and that is seagull, and that's my spirit name. So overall, because the meaning of the feather is your honor and you're connected, right, to that belief system, that when you hold that eagle feather, it's going to give you strength. But there's also that other belief that Joyce knows, is that when you use the eagle feather, you got to use it in a good way. And one of the questions when we were going through the court system was that they said, what if somebody takes that eagle feather and holds it and they're not in a good way? They're not believing that, but they want to just do it just because, right? The elders had also said, like the knowledge keepers, that we are going to do training for the court clerks and everybody at the same time. This is only the halfway mark of the story of the eagle feather coming into the court, so stay tuned for the next.
Amplifying Voices was developed in collaboration with over 60 Indigenous language keepers, experts, broadcasters, and academics, and is guided by an Indigenous advisory group comprising broadcasters, language experts, elders, and authors. The project is produced by Multicultural and the First Peoples Radio, and funded through the Radio Fund of Canada.